Khan grooming gangs accountability. Sadiq Khan was asked 3 times to apologize to victims of grooming gangs during a London Assembly session, and 3 times he refused to do so. This wasn't about policy disagreements or political point scoring. This was about a fundamental question of accountability to survivors of horrific crimes, and the Mayor of London's failure to directly address his previous denials that grooming gangs existed in the capital. What happened in that chamber matters because it reveals how politicians handle their responsibilities when confronted with institutional failures that harmed the most vulnerable. The context is crucial. Conservative GLA member Susan Hall challenged Khan about a previous session where she'd asked about grooming gangs in London, and he responded by claiming not to understand what she meant. But before we proceed, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more updates on the UK political insight. Thank you. His exact words at that earlier session were, "What does she mean? Chair, what is she talking about?" Hall's point was devastating. The victims knew exactly what she was talking about. Everyone knew. And Khan's professed confusion looked like deliberate evasion on a matter of critical importance. Hall didn't mince words. She asked Khan directly, "Would you like to apologize to all those victims who saw you dismiss this issue?" It was a straightforward question that demanded a straightforward answer. Khan's response was to talk about thinking about victims and survivors who have been treated appallingly over many years, particularly in northern towns. He mentioned the importance of support and justice. He talked about efforts to strengthen protections, all relevant points, but notably absent was an actual apology. Hall persisted, asking again, "Would you like to apologize to them for pretending you didn't know what these rape gangs were?" Khan's second response was to say it's important to clarify what is meant when it comes to grooming gangs. That's a deflection that treats a straightforward question as if it requires technical clarification. The issue wasn't definitional ambiguity. The issue was whether Khan would acknowledge that his previous denial was wrong and harmful. Hall's frustration was evident when she said Khan wasn't doing himself any favors and that everybody knew what she was talking about except him, which was particularly embarrassing given his role as police and crime commissioner. She pointed out that she'd asked his deputy mayor and never got an answer. Meanwhile, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper was asking all police forces in Britain to identify cases, but on June 19th, Khan said there were no reported cases and no indication of the grooming gangs she was concerned about. That June statement is the crux of this entire controversy. Khan said clearly and on the record that there were no reported cases and no indication of grooming gangs in London. This wasn't vague or ambiguous. It was a definitive claim about criminal activity in the capital he oversees, and it has since been proven comprehensively wrong. An investigation by The Express and My London identified 24 examples of grooming gang activity in London, including the Hillingdon case linked to serial killer Levi Belfield. That case had been known about for 7 years, meaning reports existed that directly contradicted Khan's June statement that there were no reported cases. Hall asked the obvious question: how could Khan and Metropolitan Police Commissioner Rowley claim London didn't have grooming gangs when they'd had the Belfield report for 7 years? Following these revelations, the Metropolitan Police announced it would review 9,000 potential grooming gang cases. 9,000! That's not a handful of isolated incidents. That's evidence of systematic criminal activity on a scale that makes Khan's June denial look either catastrophically misinformed or deliberately misleading. Neither option reflects well on the mayor's oversight of policing in the capital. The previous investigation in October found that Khan had read reports of young girls being raped in hotels by groups of men while publicly claiming there were no reports or indication of grooming gangs. If accurate, that means Khan was aware of specific cases but chose to deny their existence publicly. That's not a mistake or miscommunication. That's a conscious decision to present a false picture of criminal activity in London. This matters because victims and survivors of these crimes deserved better from the officials responsible for their protection and justice. When Khan professed not to understand what Hall meant by grooming gangs, when he claimed there were no reported cases, when he said there was no indication of this criminal activity, he was sending a message to survivors that their experiences were being denied at the highest levels of London governance. The three refusals to apologize during the session aren't just about political stubbornness or protecting his reputation. They represent a failure to acknowledge the harm done by those denials. An apology wouldn't change what happened to victims, it wouldn't undo the institutional failures that allowed these crimes, but it would acknowledge that the mayor's previous statements were wrong and that survivors deserve to have their experiences recognized rather than denied. Khan's emphasis on victims in northern towns, while appropriate, also serves to deflect from questions about his responsibility for London. Yes, grooming gang scandals in Rotherham, Rochdale, and other northern towns have been extensively documented and investigated. But that doesn't absolve London officials of responsibility for what's happened in the capital. Pointing to failures elsewhere doesn't address failures here. The question of what Khan knew and when he knew it is central to assessing his accountability. If he genuinely didn't know about grooming gang activity in London when he made his June statement, that suggests catastrophic failures in the information reaching the mayor about serious organized crime. If he did know and chose to deny it publicly, that's a different kind of failure that raises even more serious questions about his fitness for office. Hall's challenge about being police and crime commissioner is particularly relevant. That role carries specific responsibilities for oversight of policing priorities and performance. If grooming gangs were operating in London and the mayor responsible for police oversight was either unaware of them or denying their existence, that's a fundamental failure of the responsibilities that role entails. The Metropolitan Police's announcement that it will review 9,000 potential cases only emerged after journalistic investigations exposed the scale of the problem. That raises questions about why this review wasn't already happening, why these cases weren't already being actively investigated, and what oversight failures allowed thousands of potential cases to go unaddressed. Boris Johnson's revelation that he raised concerns about the Hillingdon gang while Prime Minister adds another layer to this. If the Prime Minister was aware of specific grooming gang activity in London and raising it with relevant officials, how did that not translate into the mayor acknowledging these cases existed? What happened to that information and why didn't it inform Khan's public statements? The institutional implications are significant. If London's mayor and police commissioner were either unaware of or denying grooming gang activity while thousands of cases existed, what does this say about the systems meant to identify, investigate, and prosecute these crimes? What does it say about communication between different levels of law enforcement and political oversight? For victims and survivors, these aren't abstract questions about bureaucratic process. These are questions about whether the people in power took their suffering seriously, whether their reports were believed and acted upon, whether the officials responsible for their protection were doing their jobs or protecting institutional reputations instead. Khan's refusal to apologize during the assembly session will be interpreted by many as prioritizing his political position over accountability to victims. Whether that interpretation is fair depends on information we don't have about what he knew, when he knew it, and why he made the statements he did. But the refusal itself, 3 times when directly asked, creates the impression of a politician more concerned with defending past statements than acknowledging their impact on survivors. This story matters beyond Khan and London because it reflects broader questions about how institutions and officials handle revelations of systematic failures to protect children from organized criminal exploitation. The Northern Town scandals revealed patterns of denial, minimization, and institutional protectiveness that allowed crimes to continue. If similar patterns existed in London, they need to be acknowledged and addressed, not defended or deflected from.